three-part series. That's why this three-part series hopefully is something that you are getting a lot of use out of. Let me just go back. I apologize for that. So for those of you who didn't notice, we are going to be recording this session, and please feel free to just be present and fully engaged in the time that we're spending together today, because you will have a chance at the end of this three-part series to receive a recording. In addition to that, there will be a follow-up email that is sent out so you can get some additional supplemental information within the next 24 hours to go even deeper into what it is that we talked about today. So without further ado, let's touch upon what it is we'll be discussing during our time today. We're going to kick it off with doing some introductions, and we're also going to delve from there directly into what it takes in order to increase the level of recruitment and retention that you are able to achieve when it comes to this crazy race that we are all up against together. So we're going to be doing that by first beginning with how to increase your self-awareness. And we have a couple of ways to achieve that, because you can't get better at anything until you understand what your starting point is. So we're going to do that by exploring the SWOT analysis as well as the stories that are being told. And then from there, you can start touching upon your candidate experience. And then we have a creative way that you can reverse engineer your ideal candidate. And what everyone's been waiting for is understanding the formula for a good job ad. So we'll be covering all of those things during the hour and 15 minutes that we have together today. So let's jump right into introductions. For those of you who've never heard of our firm, this gives you a little bit of an overview about the services that we offer. You can see right in front of you a picture of our team members. And what I want you mostly to take a look at is what our mission is and what our vision is. So our vision and everything that we strive to do is that we want to become the preferred business advisor for progressively minded organizations that demonstrate the desire to be best in class. Keep in mind, we're not saying we only want to work with organizations who are already best in class. No, we know that it is an uphill battle for every organization, whether you're small, medium, large, whether you're for-profit, nonprofit. It is a challenge, and we want to partner with you to help you be the best you can be. The only reason I mention that is because through offerings such as what it is that we are here, covering with you today, we truly want to be a supportive resource for you. So, keep that in mind, and that's kind of the lens that we put all of this information together through. All right, so now let's do introductions. And rather than do a boring, predictable introduction, I thought it would be fun for me to share just a little bit about myself based upon things that are beyond what you would see in my traditional resume, right? So if you want to look at the boring traditional resume, you can see everything to the right of your screen. And that at least reassures you that I'm not some crazy person who doesn't know what they're talking about. Maybe I'm a little crazy, but I do know what I'm talking about. And it at least gives you an overview of my work experience, the industries within which I've worked, and my educational credentials. But what I really want you to take a look at is everything else that takes up the bulk of the screen. And that's everything else that makes up the person that I am, spending time with you this morning, sharing information about this very important topic of recruiting the best when it is increasingly hard to do so. So I come from a background where, I have a huge family. I'm the youngest of 7 kids. And my husband and I, you can see pictures of us from early on in our relationship, all the way to present day. There we are early on, and this is more of a current picture. And here's a picture of us and our 3 kids a few years back. But aside from being a friend, a mother, a daughter, a sister, a wife, I'm both put together, falling apart. I'm very driven. I'm very curious. I'm a rule follower. I'm a rule breaker. And at the end of the day, what I want you to know is, just like you, I'm trying to figure out this crazy chaos that we're all living amongst as HR professionals. So now I'm going to turn it over to Amanda, who you heard from as the leader of our first session, and she will be, of course, weighing in as part of this session, as well as session 3. So I'm going to turn it over to Amanda to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see some familiar faces in the participant group today, as well as some new ones. So welcome. If you didn't join us last week, we're happy to have you joining us for this session. So just very quickly about me, I've been with Decision Associates for a little over a year. I am not an Erie native. I'm from Meadville originally, and my background encompasses a lot of marketing and economic development, spanning a lot of different industries. My husband and I live in Harbor Creek. Those are our 2 nephews down at the bottom of the screen. Yes, they are as much trouble as their smiles would indicate. I really enjoy working with Elizabeth and the talent and organizational performance practice here at Decision Associates. So excited to be contributing to today's session. And as always, I will be monitoring the chat. And so if you have any questions throughout today's presentation, please feel free to drop them there. We'll also have time for some questions at the end if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask them verbally. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Amanda. Now I would like you to have an opportunity to meet the other members of our talent and organizational performance team with a cute acronym of TOP, the TOP team. I like that play on words. And Aaron Phillips, I don't believe he's able to join us today. However, I would like you to have a chance to meet Julie, Renee, and Carmen. Julie, Renee, and Carmen serve as our 3 mighty sourcing specialists. They are focused day in, day out, just like you, on helping to source those ever elusive and evasive candidates that seem to be increasingly difficult to find. Each of them comes from a very unique background, and together we make a motley crew who is able to find those candidates that otherwise aren't necessarily active seekers, but are nonetheless excellent candidates for the opportunities that we are trying to fill. So I will turn it over to Julie. Why don't you kick it off by just very quickly saying hello to the group and introducing yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. I am Julie Hayes and a sourcing specialist, as Elizabeth said, and I'd just like to thank you all for attending today.
All right, great, thank you. Renee, if you could take a moment to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm excited to have you all here. It's really fun and interesting. I'm hoping that you all get a lot out of it. My name is Renee Thayer, and I am a sourcing specialist as well with Decision Associates. Happy to have you.
Great, thank you, Renee. And last but definitely not least, Carmen Phillips.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Carmen Phillips here. As you can figure out, the last name is the same. Aaron is my son. I started helping him out about 4 years ago as a sourcing specialist. I do welcome you today. I know you're going to really appreciate it. If you didn't have the first one, you missed something good. Amanda killed it. Welcome today, and I hope you get something out of it. Thank you.
Excellent. And Carmen, thank you for saying that, because as I said, it's worth restating. We've had a handful of people join us since I said it in the very beginning. You will receive a recording of all 3 webinar sessions at the end of this series. So definitely don't feel badly if you're unable to join us for any or all of the first session, or if you have to miss even part or all of the second or third session. You will receive recordings at the end of this series. All right, we're going to jump right in. Couple things that I want to make sure that we touch upon before we really get into the meat of what it is we're talking about today. First and foremost, I know by now everybody is, I'm sure, very well used to Zoom. But just in case you're not, I want to draw your attention to the bar at the top or bottom of your screen. It depends upon your setup as to how it appears, but there should be a bar where there is a chat bubble that appears. I would like you to locate that chat bubble, and I would like you to type me a quick message, Amanda and I a quick message. All right, Amanda just put one in, and she is inviting you to drop any questions you have. Well, I'm going to take that one step further because the way, oh, great. Liesel, Kayla, Julie, Teresa, Catherine, perfect. Everyone's rocking it out. Thank you so much. Happy Wednesday to you too, Community Blood Bank. And good morning, Ross. So thank you for doing that, because not only do I want to make sure you're well positioned to use your chat for questions, but even equally as important, this is going to be a dialogue. This is going to be a conversation. I want to hear from you. And to be honest, that's how we're going to learn. It's great for you to hear from us, but it's even better if you can hear from each other. So there will be opportunities throughout this entire presentation today where I'm truly not going to be asking rhetorical questions, but I'm going to be wanting to hear your input. You can feel free to unmute yourself and answer verbally, or you can feel free to type your comment in this chat box, which is why I wanted to make sure everyone knew where it was. And Amanda, if you could assist by helping to monitor that chat box, that would be great. All right. So in the beginning, we talked about where are we going to start? And as with anything, right? Think of anything that you're really good at. Think of anything that you've really improved on. Just like recruitment, the only way we can get better, become good or stronger at anything is if we have a really solid understanding of our starting point, right? How many of you have ever been on a journey to quit smoking or lose weight or get in better shape or improve your financial situation? I'm sure just about everybody has done at least one of those things, right? So think about, for the times that you were able to succeed, why was it you were able to succeed? Well, because first you had to take an honest look in the mirror and you had to understand where you were starting from. You couldn't measure the weight loss successes unless you understood what your starting weight was. You couldn't improve, right, how you are in your financial position until you understood what your starting point is. What is your spending? What are the needless spending habits that you have? What are the most important, right? So just like that, the only way we can even begin to improve when it comes to overhauling your recruitment strategy is by increasing your level of self-awareness. And there are lots of ways we can do this, but to boil it down to its most simplistic parts, I want you to think about it in two different ways. The first is a recruitment SWOT, and the second is really understanding the stories that are being told. So let's first start with a recruitment SWOT. All right, so everybody knows what a SWOT is, right? Does everybody know what a SWOT analysis is? Who knows? S stands for what? Strengths, right? W is what? Weaknesses. O is for opportunities. T is threats, right? And just as a general refresher, your strengths and your weaknesses, those are internal, right? So internally, within our organization, within our recruitment process, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? Whereas opportunities and threats are looking externally, right? Externally in the marketplace. And we already established in session one, it is a fierce marketplace, right? Amanda did a phenomenal job giving you all kinds of statistics that paint a picture, although not super encouraging picture, but a realistic picture nonetheless of the external marketplace. So the opportunities and threats are focused externally, right? What's the reality that you're living in? So the question I have for you is, how do you think this information can be used? Because at the end of the day, right, a SWOT related to why a person would or not want to work at your organization, we're telling you it is extremely important as a critical starting point to overhaul your recruitment strategy. Okay, that's undeniable. But what I want to hear from you, and this is not a rhetorical question, I truly want you to put it in the chat box or unmute yourself and share with the group. How do you suppose you can use this information? Tell me how you would use the information of going through the exercise of doing a recruitment SWOT. So what are your thoughts? How can you use the information of doing a recruitment SWOT? How do you feel it would be helpful to know how your organization compares to others? Please feel free to unmute or put your thoughts down. I'll give you about 15 seconds or so to really think about that.
Good morning. It's Sabrina.
Hi, Sabrina.
Hi. I think first and foremost, this needs to be an exercise with key players in the organization, not just human resources.
Yes.
Everyone's on the same page and everyone agrees to what the strengths and the weaknesses are, in addition to the opportunities and threats. It gives your company a game plan, and it opens the eyes of the leaders as far as wages and benefits and what kind of creative plans you can put into place to attract people.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And as you stated very eloquently, and as your peers in today's webinar are stating in the chat box, this information is definitely important, not just for recruitment, but as Cindy stated, also for retention, right? And do you guys remember what I said for those of you who joined us? I don't know if any of you remember what I said the best recruitment strategy is. Does anyone remember?
Retention.
That's right. It's retention. Absolutely. Yes, Kayla. Yes. Retention. That is the #1 recruitment strategy. For the third and final series offering or session offering that we provide next week as part of this 3-part series, we're going to be focusing entirely on retention and leadership for retention. But I love what you just said. You said, hey, it's not just an HR exercise. It's important to include other stakeholders in the organization, the hiring managers, right? Imagine if you went through a recruitment SWOT before you launched any search. Yes, it's an extra step. Yes, it takes time, but oh my gosh, let's take a look at how this information can be used, and it shows the value of why. So here are some ways, right, that you can use this information. First and foremost, you can understand how you compare, right? It's important to understand how you compare in competing organizations. And as Amanda talked about last week, your competition is no longer regional. Your competition is global. People have more options than ever before of where they want to work, how they want to work, when they want to work. So the way in which you understand how you compare to the competition is critical. Also, too, it can help you understand the best way to structure your job description and position profile so that you can attract the talent you need. So many of us are still going off of what has worked in the past. And so many of us are banging our heads against the wall because it's not working the same way it used to. And we just can't figure out the formula. We can't figure out what to do. Well, by going through this unique recruitment SWOT each and every time you launch a search, it will enable you to understand what you need for each unique opportunity, because each one truly does have its own uniqueness. And going through that exercise with the hiring manager is going to save you, for those of you who are in charge of recruitment, it's going to save you so much time and so much of a headache trying to get them to see the light when it comes to the role that you need them to play in attracting and hiring the best. Additionally, it can help you anticipate in advance the concerns that any potential candidates may have about your role, about the organization. And therefore, when it comes time to make a move with a person you want to hire, you are starting out already with an advantage because you're negotiating from a position of knowledge, right? You've already put the time and energy and effort into thinking through it. So now let's talk about a little bit about some of the questions that are helpful for you to ask yourself, right? You know, we already talked about, you know, what the S, W, and O and T stand for. And I'm going to repeat it again. The S and the W, strengths and weaknesses, that's looking internally. The O's and the T's, those are your opportunities and threats, and that's looking externally, right? But here are some general questions that are going to be helpful for you to ask as you're going through this recruitment SWOT exercise with the hiring managers for each of your unique searches. It'll help you to really make sure you're thinking about it in all the right ways. So what I would love to throw out to the group, pick any question from this list of questions that jumps out at you. And I'd like you to, you know, share with the group, share with us, for those of you comfortable sharing, whether it be in the chat or unmute yourself. Which of these questions jumps off the screen at you as being a question that would be particularly useful in your current environment to take the time to ask before you start the recruitment process? So once again, I want to hear from you. Which of these questions jumps off the screen at you as being a question important to ask in your unique recruitment environment within your organization for the types of positions you're trying to fill that would really be helpful? So again, I'll give you about 15 or 20 seconds to just review this list, and then we'll hear. Catherine, compensation. So the compensation question. How is compensation, salary, bonuses, options, equity, how is it determined at your organization and at your competitors? We have 2 votes for advancement opportunities. Yes, Sabrina and Melissa, yep. Compensation, more votes for compensation. So advancement and compensation seem to be at the top so far. Ooh, Emily, what does your organization offer that competitors do not? Right. So now, layering on top of that, if you were to ask those questions of your hiring managers, because we're all used, right? We're all used to asking these questions of ourselves, for those of us responsible for, you know, recruiting. But what do you think your hiring managers would say? Cindy, if it's okay with you, I'm going to pick on you because I love the fact that you just shared in the chat that you actually have been completing a monthly analysis of competitors and positions and looking at compensation and other perks to see how you compare. And then you mentioned you're discussing it at the senior level to make changes. Cindy, would you mind unmuting yourself if you're comfortable doing so and just sharing with the group, number one, what role do you hold in your organization? For example, are you in human resources? Are you in a different type of leadership role? And then number 2, what are some interesting epiphanies that your other managers have been arriving at as you walk through this monthly analysis?
Cindy said, unfortunately, her computer doesn't have a microphone, so she's answering in the chat.
Oh, awesome. Amanda, do you mind reading her responses out loud?
Sure. She said she's the Chief Human Resources Officer.
Awesome.
And
no pressure, Cindy. Poor Cindy, I can just envision her furiously typing.
And Cindy, you're with the Achievement Center, I believe.
You know, as Cindy's thinking of her thoughts and putting them down, I do just want to say, I love that exercise that Cindy referenced. And it's something, this is why it's so awesome, not just to hear from us. I love to open it throughout the entire session to everybody else because you could also learn from each other. And I would like you to make a note of that as an excellent practice to consider putting into place the practice that Cindy mentioned of monthly analysis. Amanda, if you could read the rest of her response.
Yep, she said, it's been a surprise as others see what competitors are offering, and then they're surprised to see what we're actually doing. I think educating our directors and managers has been helpful.
Yeah,
She said they can try to recruit others.
absolutely. And, you know, Melissa and Sabrina have some important questions. And oh, look at that, Cindy. She said, already you've increased your referral bonus to $1,000. So I love the question. How are you finding this information from other organizations? Because some find it difficult to track down. So, you know, Cindy's saying, hey, we search ads. So literally take a look at it through the eyes of a job seeker. And ads, exactly like Cindy is saying, those are extremely timely. It's in real time. And also, too, there are other people that she's utilizing as resources, right? So if you have friends, if you have family, if you have people that can, you know, even go through the application process, there's no shame in that, to understand exactly what your competitors are doing. There are lots of different things that you can do.
That actually,
All
if I
right.
could just jump in real quick, Elizabeth,
Yeah,
that
please,
actually
please.
goes off of, you know, one of the things that I said last week, which was secret shopping your process, as Elizabeth just mentioned, having them go through the application process and all of that. But I think if you expand your perspective on that a little bit and have them actually approach it as if they were searching for that particular job, not just at your organization, but in general. And so,
Mhm.
you know, Googling, going to job boards, looking for positions that have similar titles, just to take a look at those ads and figure out, how are people promoting these? What sorts of advantages are they offering that we're not offering?
Yes. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. Don't just look at the most obvious. Oh, let's just do apples to apples, but let's take a look at, you know, the actual positions within the similar talent pool that we're recruiting against. And, you know, how do we stack up? How do we stack up? All right. So now let's move on. We talked about that. Now let's talk a little bit about the stories that are being told. And Amanda, I would love it if, I know this is something that you are extremely passionate about as it pertains to branding. And it's
Mhm.
something that you touched upon very briefly for the first session. But Amanda, I'd love if you could touch upon, you know, the importance of the stories being told and even just the process of assessing both your internal and external assets. How does that play into it all?
Sure. So as far as the assessment of your assets, and honestly, if you think of it from the perspective of, you know, you're trying to market your organization instead of, you know, maybe marketing in the more traditional sense where you're looking at, who are my potential customers, who are my current customers, and how am I reaching them? It's the exact same mindset, just looking at current and potential employees. And it's extremely important to not forget your current employees in this process. So as you're assessing those internal assets, as Elizabeth has up on the screen right now, it should all start with your mission, vision, and values. Um, Everything that your organization does, all of the messaging that your organization puts out, should always tie back to that mission, vision, and values. They are your centralizing point for all communications from your organization. And so from there, you know, taking a look at, as I said last week, understanding what the conversation is on all of those different career sites, reviewing social media pages, secret shopping, like we just talked about, reviewing any existing messaging that's out there for, you know, accompanying your job postings, on your career page on your website. Just getting a feel for, is the messaging that I'm offering across all of these different platforms consistent? Not only is it consistent cross-platform, but is it consistent with my mission, vision, and values? And I think also setting up some kind of process, just as you would set up a process to capture testimonials from customers, capturing testimonials from your existing employees. What is it about our company that really attracted you to work here and stay here? Telling those really interesting stories of the employees who have come in, who've, you know, who are new with the organization, who've been there for a long time, kind of capturing, the full gamut of experiences. Those are the kinds of things, because as you know, think of your own career progression. If you are considering working at a new company, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to look through your contacts to see if you know anybody who works there. And if you do, you're going to reach out to them and say, hey, what's it like to work there? That's what people do. It's, the Glassdoor sites, the Indeed, that's great. It provides some additional information, but ultimately word of mouth carries so much power, and you have the capability to empower your team to give messaging about your company and about their experience in a way that's consistent with your employer brand. So making sure you're giving a lot of consideration to how your employees are talking about their experience working for your company and what they're saying, how they're saying it, giving them the tools to be able to communicate those messages effectively, that's going to be a huge step in the right direction to making sure that you have more control over that employee brand or employer brand and over the stories that are being told.
Excellent. Thank you, Amanda. Yes, and you could hear it in her voice and see it on her face as she's explaining it. This is something Amanda is extremely passionate about, and something that we definitely see day in, day out the importance of for employers who struggle, more than others or less than others as it pertains to, really understanding the stories that are being told and getting ahead of those and really having their arms around it. So Amanda, while you were talking, I put a comment in the chat box and I asked for people to share what their personal experience has been with referral bonuses, because Amanda, you and I talk about it all the time, as do we talk about it with Julie and Renee and Carmen and Aaron, and that is, how effective are referral bonuses? So M. Kelly, I don't know what M stands for, maybe Mike or Mary or Michelle, not sure, but M says that the challenge for his company is that they have about 14 sites in different states. Although the mission and values are the same throughout the company, each site's reputation it varies basically depending on the region. So that is a comment regarding what it is Amanda just discussed. Mm-hmm. Emily has a comment related to referral bonuses. And Emily, you are sharing with the group that you've recently implemented a new style of referral bonuses where staff get paid at every point in the process. Love that idea, Emily. Phone screening, interview, hired, 6 months of employment. And so far, you're seeing a bump in referrals. You're interested in seeing if over time it increases overall, but absolutely. That is one suggestion that I was going to be sharing in the upcoming slides, but let's cut to the chase right now. Definitely what she just mentioned in terms of referral bonuses. And TJ, I want to work there if I can earn up to $20,000 for each referral. I'm just saying. No, I'm just kidding. I love Decision Associates, but wow, that's a number that definitely captures your attention. But as she just mentioned, we are seeing with clients that are struggling with referral bonuses, the reason we see them struggling is because they're waiting too long down the pipeline for the referring employee to actually receive the payout. And quite honestly, it's not as enticing, right? And if I could be honest, retention, obviously, that's why our third session is dedicated to this topic of retention. Retention is increasingly more difficult. So we really want to push for not only referrals, but for retention. And so I love the idea, and I was going to mention, think of creative ways how you can have payouts for those referral bonuses intermittently as opposed to waiting 6 months or a year or even 3 months. And I'm not surprised that she has seen an uptick in referral bonuses. If you don't mind capturing that, Amanda, as something that we share out with the larger group after today's session as a best practice. I love that. All right, so now we talked about the SWOT analysis. We talked about the stories being told. That's your starting point. Now let's talk about your candidate's experience. First and foremost, there are 4 words I want you to remember. Those 4 words are clear, honest, consistent, and timely. It blows my mind, and I'm sure it blows your minds too, how many times, despite how competitive we know it is to find top talent, how frequently we misstep when it comes to the candidate experience. Someone said in the chat box earlier in today's session that recruitment is sales. It absolutely is. And for any of us who've ever bought anything, which is 100% of us, we can see through a BS sales pitch like no tomorrow. And what do you do when someone's giving you a BS sales pitch? Well, you take your business elsewhere. Your candidate is no different. So I don't want you to think that your job is done by putting together a slick recruitment advertisement or having a really nice platform that they can hop online and advertise and apply through, right? It's every step along the way, including how you reject them, how you disqualify them, and the communication they receive from you for that. So I want you to really think about your candidate's experience. How do you show up? How do you show up on your corporate career site, in your advertisements, your online application process, any communication from your automated, applicant tracking system, your interview process, your communication that they participate in, not just with the members of your HR team or recruitment staff, but how well trained and positioned are the hiring managers and other team members and other leadership team members who don't typically participate in recruitment? How well trained are they to really give an excellent candidate experience? I would love it. Here's another time, because this is a very interactive session. I'd love it if you could take a look at this list, and if you could share with the group 2 things. Number 1, and you can drop it in the chat box. Number 1, which of these steps along the way would you say your organization knocks it out of the park with clear, honest, consistent, timely communication? And which of these areas that you see on your screen could you use some improvement? So once again, we want to hear from you. Which of these areas do you feel your team really knocks it out of the park with your candidate experience? And in which of these areas do you feel, yep, we could improve? Feel free to drop it in the chat or to unmute yourself. All right, Amanda, could you read out loud what people are saying?
Sure. Melody just followed up on a comment from her statement about having multiple different locations, and she just said, what I found is that site leadership determines the reputation of the site we're working with them for consistency. That's good, Melody. Sabrina says candidate status is going well. I think our company is strong in communication with candidates and talk to them throughout each step of the process. Sabrina also said their process is too long.
Yeah, and Sabrina, and I'm sure other people are also thinking, oh yeah, yep, I can relate to some of what is being shared in this chat box. The threshold for a long process has dramatically changed, right? And I know even for our process, we used to be really proud that, within 12 weeks, that's the typical, process it takes from the moment a position is determined to need to be recruited for to the moment we have hired somebody and there's a fanny in the seat, right? But that is changing. 12 weeks is far too long. nowadays in many instances. So we're constantly thinking of how we can even refine our process to shrink it down. Amanda, what else are you seeing come up in the chat box?
Julie says, I feel we do a great job explaining and communicating on job sites and advertisements, speaking with candidates throughout the process. Where we need improvement is communication within the team and hiring managers.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa says communication during process. Melissa, is that an area that you feel you're doing well? Just to clarify.
And as Melissa, oh, no.
Oh, no.
Okay,
Okay.
an opportunity for improvement, opportunity for improvement.
Cindy
Yeah.
says we're developing a new career site, so we're excited for that. Ask hiring managers to contact applicants once accepted to welcome them to the agency and coordinate with them along the way until their hire date. But we need a new ATS system as the application process has been cited as a barrier for some. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
definitely seeing a lot more of that.
Yeah, you know, I do want to say we happened to invest after a significant amount of research, which I know Amanda already talked about in the first session, but after a significant amount of research, when it comes to overhauling your recruitment strategy, we're constantly reevaluating ours as well on behalf of the clients that we serve. And we recognized, you know, we needed an applicant tracking system. So we happened to choose Workable. That seemed to be the right solution for us. But, you know, we saw a dramatic you know, decrease in the time to hire just by and improvement in the candidate experience just by investing and constantly, you know, staying on top of how we can maximize the use of our particular applicant tracking system. All right. So again, wanting it to, you know, as we talk about overhauling your recruitment strategy, we started with what is your starting point? We talked about the importance of a SWOT analysis. We talked about the importance of how you show up, right? What are people saying about you? Now we have transitioned to your overall candidate experience. We've had a lot of great conversation about that. Thank you for weighing in. Clear, honest, consistent, timely. That's what I want you to strive for and redefine what timely means. Timely, what was timely 12 months ago is no longer timely. So we used to be really proud. I'm going to give you a specific example. We used to be really proud that we would get back to every candidate within 24 hours, every candidate. Amanda, what have we shrunk that down to now?
Oh, I mean, some candidates, depending on the time of day that they apply, some candidates hear back from us in like 10, 15 minutes.
Yes. I quite literally, this is not an exaggeration. And Julie, you can feel free to unmute yourself and weigh in on this as well, because I believe it was a candidate that Julie sourced. Quite literally, for an extremely competitive position in a fierce marketplace with a very slim, shallow talent pool, but a high demand and need from our particular client, we quite literally had a candidate that submitted their credentials after speaking with Julie, had a phone screen with Julie within a ridiculous amount of time. I want to say within a couple hours of submitting their credentials, and then was already moved on for an in-depth interview with me within an hour and a half of her phone screen with Julie, and was already scheduled to come for an on-site interview with our client. And this was an out-of-state person, out-of-state candidate who would need to relocate. Already, I was reaching out to the client to get that scheduled within a total time frame of 6 hours from when Julie originally sourced them, right?
Yeah, you summarized that very well. It was very quick. We knew the candidate was the right candidate. It was going to be a great match, and we did not waste any time.
Right. And oh, by the way, that candidate had already received an offer and had already begun packing up their house to relocate elsewhere for a different position. So again, I'm sharing these examples, which you might be thinking, that's ridiculous. That's crazy. That should be a candidate that you wouldn't even bother with when they told you they already were thinking of something else. But no, we want you to challenge your definition of a candidate so that you push your limits, because the competition is more and more fierce. And what was once timely is no longer considered timely. All right, I think we've belabored this point and given good enough examples. Let's go on to the next. So we talked about why it's important. Here's what it boils down to, right? It's definitely going to help you to attract more candidates. So again, let's go back. What's going to help you? Well, by being clear, honest, consistent, and timely for your overall candidate experience. That is going to help you attract more candidates, compete for the best talent, increase your quality of hire, and then all of it increases your brand awareness. So not just how you recruit and interview, but also how you communicate with candidates who are not selected. And Amanda, what was the statistic you shared last week? It's like in the teens in terms of the percentage of candidates who actually hear back that they were not selected for a position. Do you happen to recall what that number was?
16%.
So 16%. So statistically speaking, only 16% of the organizations represented in this group for today's webinar, only 16% of you are actually getting back to your candidates who are not selected. You don't have to reveal yourself. if you fall within, the remaining percentage, but if you are in that 16% who are getting back to candidates, kudos to you, keep it going. But chances are you're in the 86% that aren't. Challenge that. Why? Whatever the reason is, it's not acceptable, right? What can you do to make it work? And Kelly, I love how you said, hey, wait a minute here, I get back to everyone. That's awesome. You're in the 16%. All right. So let me minimize the chat box so I can move on to the next slide. Okay. So now I really want you to think about how to reverse engineer your ideal candidate. And, we're walking you through in the next 3 slides, I'm walking you through sequentially what that looks like. But Amanda, you and I were chatting about this, so gosh, maybe a month and a half ago, reverse engineering your ideal candidate. And I loved how you the way you think about it and the way, as we were talking about it, I loved what you said to kind of articulate the importance of doing it. Do you have any thoughts to share as we transition to, now that they've figured out their starting point, now that they've gone from there to really be intentional about their candidate experience, how it is reverse engineering their ideal candidate can help in overhauling their recruitment strategy? Do you have any thoughts on that, Amanda?
Yeah, so generally speaking, I'm a big fan of reverse engineering most things, looking at where you want to ultimately be. And if you think from the perspective of, an ideal situation, okay, if I could fill this position with the quote unquote perfect person tomorrow, what does that look like? And then starting to also look at other people within your organization who may not necessarily have that same type of job responsibility, but who embodies the most important qualities and behaviors that are important to your company. So, and again, that should all tie back to the mission, vision, and values. So if you can kind of create that picture of what this candidate looks like first, then it's easier to kind of back your way all the way back out to the initial application to identify, what are those qualities? Because bottom line is, a lot of things, actual responsibilities, tasks, things that are focused on actually doing the job, a lot of that can be trained or taught or upskilled or whatever the case may be. But there are those kind of non-negotiable items, the personality traits, the characteristics, the behaviors that can't be taught. That's just how somebody's hardwired. So ultimately, it doesn't matter if the person has all the skills in the world, but they don't have the embodiment of those characteristics and those behaviors, it's never going to be a good fit. So I would encourage you, as you're reverse engineering to think from the very beginning, how is this person hardwired, and look at how some of your top performing employees are hardwired, and what are those qualities that you can kind of pull out of those people to position for yourself as top priority as you're sifting through candidates once you get all the way back out to the search process.
Thank you. Very well said. And there are lots of different assessments that you can use, with existing, existing employees who, would fit that definition of someone you'd like to clone. And, maybe you have some assessments and tools and resources that you are tried and true and you really love. If you do, please drop it in the chat box, because those are good suggestions and ideas for your fellow peers on today's webinar to consider. And we will definitely capture all of those and include that in the follow-up email that we send. But one that I would definitely, encourage you to consider would be the predictive index, otherwise known as PI. Another one that you can utilize certainly is, the DISC assessment. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of the Enneagram assessment. That's another one. Another assessment, certainly that you can use is something called the PXT. But there's actually, Amanda, we have a document that we can definitely send to the group. And it can show you for each of the different types of assessments, which ones are better suited for which parts along the employment journey. So that'll be a supplemental resource that we send to you that will help you in reverse engineering your ideal candidate. So you start here, right? Have that conversation with the hiring managers about the person that, they would love to clone to fill that position. And then from there, you want to go into really digging into that person's background. What are the positions that they held previously, whether it be, positions within your organization that they held prior to joining the leadership team, let's say, for example. What was their career journey within your organization, or even if they are newer to your organization, what were the different positions they held elsewhere? What types of companies did they work for? What was their experience? What's their education level? Amanda talked last week about the importance of really challenging your requirements as they exist today pertaining to education. Maybe you're saying, nope, this person has to have a particular degree in thus and such. It's the only way that we can consider them. Well, for some professions, such as the medical profession or law profession, or even if you need a CPA, sure, you need that. You don't want someone performing surgery on you, who's never gone to medical school. Okay, clearly you need to have degree requirements. But there are degree requirements, I guarantee it, that exist in most of your organizations right now for positions that you are currently searching to fill, that you can challenge what those requirements are. So you can do that by reverse engineering your ideal candidate. So the next step, once you've done that to help you create that ideal candidate profile, is to then see, okay, now that we've reversed engineered it, let's challenge our existing requirements for the position that we're trying to fill right now. And I would encourage you to do it. Practice this reverse engineering process with a position that you are having an especially tricky time filling. I would encourage you to give it a whirl with a position that you're having an especially tricky time filling. And once you reverse engineer it, and now you come up with that ideal candidate profile, now let's compare that ideal candidate profile to the requirements as stated currently for the position you're having a tricky time filling. Does that make sense? Amanda, anything else you'd like to add to this?
I don't think, other than just stressing the importance of, basing everything on mission, vision, values, tying it all back to that.
All right, perfect.
Can't stress that enough.
No, definitely not. All right, so we're going to move on. And now what you've all been waiting for, okay? So the formula for a good job ad. Amanda, this is something that I also know you are very excited and passionate about. How do you feel about walking them through it?
I feel great about it.
Awesome. I will monitor the chat box while you do that.
Perfect. So this formula, we cannot take credit for this. This formula actually was shared as part of the SHRM Talent Conference I attended back in April. Another presenter, I did not send his information last week, but I will send it in the follow-up email this week. His name is Ryan, I believe Kohler is his last name. So actually, interestingly enough, his background is very similar to mine in that he comes from a marketing background and then moved into doing more of, recruitment type work. So he shared this formula for a successful job ad. And I think you're probably going to see, if you're looking through those points, some similarities in how you've written job ads in the past with some new things sprinkled in. So first and foremost, he talks about the importance of qualifying your audience right out of the gate. So looking at putting something at the beginning of your posting that is going to grab their attention and help them self-select whether or not this is a position that would be of interest to them. So starting with a question: are you sick and tired of dealing with blah, blah, blah? Do you like to XYZ? And I've actually started doing this in my own social media posts, actually, for positions that we are recruiting for. And I've seen definitely an increase in the number of engagements that I've gotten with those posts when I start it with a question. Going into the second point, what is it like to work for us? So this is where you can go, really simple and just pull up some semblance of positive feedback from Glassdoor, Indeed, Google, wherever you've found some reviews about your company. Or you could get really specific with it and put in an actual, brief testimonial from a current employee. What our employees say about us. So again, just a little bit more meat to that. What are the benefits of working there? What are the things that they've appreciated about the company over the years? What opportunities have they taken advantage of? What is a day in the life of doing this job like? And for some positions, like this one that I'm in, for example, every day is different. So that's okay. Say that, because that kind of a position is going to appeal to people who, doing the same thing day in and day out, they're not hardwired to enjoy that. And that's okay. So if every day is different, advertise that. What is the manager like? This one, I think, at least from the people who were attending the session when I was listening in on it, caused a little bit of a stir. But he has a great point. And he said, if statistics are showing us that a lot of people who quit jobs within, the last couple of years, that they were leaving managers, if the manager for that position is really amazing, talk about that. You need to, because if this person's going to be the regular point of contact for the employee, they want to know that they're coming in to a really strong leader. So absolutely promote, the manager. If they're not so amazing, well, opportunity for training, number one. And maybe that's something that you opt to leave out of the posting, and that's okay. This is not like 100% have to follow every single thing, but this is a good formula. So it's a guide. Minimum requirements. Again, I'm stressing the importance. Elizabeth mentioned it this week. I mentioned it last week. You're going to get sick of hearing it from us by the end of the third session, and that is reassess your requirements. Education being at the top of that list. That was, if there was, one major takeaway that I heard from the SHRM Talent Conference in April, that was, if you're requiring a college degree for a job that doesn't actually require a college degree, get it out of there. Do not put it in your job posting, because you are potentially losing out on some really great candidates who, just because they don't have that degree, they're not going to apply for the position. And they could be perfectly capable, if not even better, than somebody who does have the college degree at doing the job. So reassess your requirements. What is the work schedule and environment like? And that's something I bet as Julie's been helping us out with some screenings, I'm sure she's heard this question quite a bit too. And that is, we're starting to get more questions about what are the hours that I'm expected to work? In what environment? Am I going to be in the office? Am I going to be at home? If I'm in the office, what's the office like? Is it like here at Decision Associates, we have a big open office space with some offices on the, private offices on the perimeter. Describe the physical space a little bit. And the work schedule as well. And that's, again, where if you have the ability to offer some flexibility where you'd want to tout that, flexibility on, as we talked last week, when and or where you work. What's the next step? So, okay, you've read through the job ad, you're still with me, that's great news. So you want to apply. How and where do you do that? You make those instructions extremely clear, very, very obvious with a link, and then your application process itself, that's where you get into the subsequent stages. You need to be really tight with the application process. Like I said last week, asking for the basics: name, email address, phone number, resume. That's it. Anything else you could possibly need from them to be able to make a decision about whether they're a good fit or not, they can submit that later. And then what happens after that? That last point's really important, not just as part of the job ad, but also as part of the subsequent conversations that you have with candidates. I think I mentioned last week that one thing that's really important to our process here at Decision Associates is that every single step of the way, at the end of the interview call, they will get a summary of, okay, you're here, this is what's coming next. And we go all the way through the end of the process. And yeah, you might think that's a lot of information to throw at a candidate at once, like, especially for a process like ours that has multiple interview steps, but they appreciate knowing where the end of the line is. How many interviews am I going to have? What's going to be expected of me? And we even do that. We're hiring for an internship position right now for us. And I've been very clear with the candidates, screening, you're going to come in for an in-person interview. We're going to have a writing challenge that's going to be, a stretch assignment. You're going to have a designated amount of time to complete this so we can get a sense of your writing ability. We're going to have an assessment for you to figure out how you're hardwired and how you work with the rest of the team. And then we'll be making, hiring decisions after we check your references. So just giving them a quick verbal overview of the full process so they know exactly what to expect. They should be getting that every single step of the way, including as part of the job ad.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And, a couple things that I want to emphasize. We're talking so much about, overhauling your recruitment strategy, and we've given you some really good pointers as to how to do that today. But as we talk about, management for retention, which is the third and final installment of this webinar series, we're also going to be talking about things to consider from an onboarding perspective. I was going back and forth of if onboarding should be in today's session or the third, but we are going to be covering it in next week's session, amongst other things. But, I really want to emphasize a couple of points. First and foremost, it is important to be really smart about your KPIs, your key performance indicators, otherwise known as metrics. What are the metrics you are tracking as it pertains to recruitment, right? So one of the things that we will be sending you within the next 24 hours after today's session is a follow-up to what we talked about today, are examples of recruitment-related metrics or KPIs that we suggest you consider tracking so that it can position you to not only develop, but to sustain a recruitment strategy that makes sense, because you're going to need to be open and willing to flex and change it in real time based upon the changing demands of the external market, right? Secondly, I want to delve a little bit more deeply into some of the realistic questions that we're being hit with when we are sourcing candidates. And I'd like to ask Renee, who, as we introduced earlier, is one of our 3 sourcing specialists. I'd like to ask her to weigh in on something. Now, Renee So Carmen and Julie, they are really, really good at sourcing candidates from the perspective of really doing research and finding candidates, that are needles in a haystack. Renee's area of expertise is she is a kick butt cold caller. And that is a skill that I'm sure, as many of you can appreciate, is not an easy skill to have. And it's just something that she's really, really good at. So Renee, since we talked earlier in today's webinar about, things to consider at each step throughout the, application process for our candidates, for their candidate experience, I'd love if you could share with the group, for the candidates that you cold call and are able to, generate their response and interest just during that initial conversation, what are some of the questions that you're being hit with for those initial conversations you have when you're just simply trying to pitch the idea of having them consider being screened for the position?
Sure. So I would say the top question, and kind of going back to what Amanda was saying earlier, a lot of people want to know if the positions are to be considered remote or in person. That's a very big question that I receive. The second biggest is, what will my hours be? And the third biggest is salary. Those are the top three, I would say, out of most everyone that I speak to, the most common and most frequently asked questions during those calls. And I'm trying to think of something that maybe, would be out there a little bit more, just to kind of wrap your head around that people could be asking. But for the most part, those are the three most commonly asked questions during those calls. I haven't had anything very strange, but it's a lot of what Amanda was speaking of earlier. And it's very, very true during my process as well.
Okay, thank you. So having that information obviously is so important, on the front end. So that's all I had prepared. Amanda, I know we're going to be sending out follow-up just like we did after the first session. We will be doing that, so there's more to come. Amanda, by chance, for the poll, do you have that ready to pull up? Because before you depart, we want to make sure we get your input on 3 specific questions. So it will take you
Just
about 2 seconds. If you could just please quickly, it helps us to make sure these sessions give you what you need. But if you could quickly answer these questions, that would be great.
Just 2 quick ones there.
Perfect. Thank you. Amanda, any closing thoughts? Julie, Carmen, Renee, any closing thoughts before we wrap?
I would say that this, between this session and next week, there's a lot of information that we're sharing with you, right? And this could be extremely overwhelming, and we fully recognize that. I always say sometimes webinars are kind of like drinking from a fire hose. It's like all of this information, and what do I do with it? So I would say, if you find yourself feeling overwhelmed about, what to do with all of this information, it's just a matter of starting slowly, knowing that none of this is going to change overnight, that this is going to take effort and time. And also, I'll emphasize a point that I made last week, which is this is not 100% on human resources. This is a team effort. And somebody mentioned in the chat earlier that it might have, I don't remember if it was Melissa maybe, that said, as we look at our application process, our ATS, everything, it's a group effort. It's not just human resources. So taking your time, Elizabeth and I, we have our contact information up here on the screen. We are here to help you. So please, we had some folks reach out after the last session with some questions. Please do not hesitate to do that. We're here to help you.
Yes, and if you can't tell, we really love this. This is something that both of us and our entire team, for that matter, are very, very passionate about. And, like S. Fisher just said, it is all about baby steps. We don't want any of you walking out of any of these sessions feeling overwhelmed or feeling like, forget it, I'm so far behind the 8 ball, there's no hope. It's truly taking it one baby step at a time. And as long as you're taking steps in the right direction, you're in great shape. So we truly appreciate your time. We look forward to spending, this hour and 15 minutes with you each week. And, if there's anything as you're looking through the materials we'll be sending out within the next 24 hours as a follow-up, or as you, process what you heard today, if there's anything at all you need, please don't be shy to reach out. But we hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day, wonderful rest of the week, and go kill it when it comes to recruiting. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.